A nation moves from authoritarianism and climbs to a stage called an electoral democratic status, or electoral democracy is also referred to as transitional democracy. So the first stage that a nation moves from when a nation moves from authoritarian status, the next stage it moves into is into a transitional democratic status. So you move from authoritarianism to a transitional democratic status. So Ghana, we were under the authoritarian regime of the government of the PNDC. But when we wanted to move from there in the 1990s, when we were told to democratize as a conditionality for us to access aid, we moved from that authoritarian status to a transitional democratic status or an electoral democratic status. Now, in a transitional or in an electoral democracy, the only human rights that are pervasive or that are noticeable are the political rights. Here, it is the right to vote and be voted for in an election, and the right to offer criticisms against the government that are seen as prevalent. Now, listen, the right to vote and be voted for is provided for. The right to offer criticisms against the government is also provided for. But these rights that are noticeable are also in their very elementary status in transitional democracies. So, the right to vote or be voted for, or the conduct of periodic election, as noticeable in transitional democracies, are plagued with several challenges. So the elections may be conducted periodically in transitional democracies, but we are not able to guarantee whether they are going to be free, fair, peaceful, and transparent. In transitional democracies, because these political rights are always in their fledgling status, there's always a threat of democratic relapse. That's how come anytime there's going to be elections, people are always praying and asking God to intervene, and people are flying out of the country, flying their children out of the country, and there's always a fear that there could be violence, there could be democratic relapse. So you have political right to criticize the government, but we cannot guarantee your rights after you have criticized the government. Sometimes you may be threatened, sometimes you may be attacked, sometimes you may be brutalized, and all that. And if you contest elections, the elections may not be necessarily free, fair, peaceful, and transparent. So note this: political rights in their fledgling or in their very elementary states are noticed or are noticeable within transitional democracies, i.e., the conduct of periodic elections, but they may not be free, fair, peaceful, and transparent. And then also the right to criticize. But I'm saying that even that, if you criticize, we cannot guarantee your freedom after you have criticized. In some transitional democracies, governments may tend to be tolerant, but in other transitional democracies, government may not be tolerant of dissenting views, and people will come up with all manner of threats and all manner of things and attacks and all that. Note this: ECOSOC rights in transitional democracies are so undeveloped or unheard of. Economic, social, and cultural rights, they are the ECOSOC rights I'm talking about. In transitional democracies, no, they are in their very, 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 very rudimentary stages, and they are not too noticeable. What is noticeable? The rights that are noticeable in transitional democracies essentially are political rights that even have problems, but economic rights. So people are poor. Economic, social, and cultural rights are not so developed in transitional democracies. I'll go on to talk about the next stage of democratic progression in the next lecture.